There's been considerable reporting that these two suspects are linked to the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. We have evidence that both suspects expressed interest in this group, but we have not definitively established any formal links to that organization or to any other group. There has been considerable reporting that these two suspects are linked to the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. We have evidence that both suspects expressed interest in this group, but we have not definitively established any formal links to that organization or to any other group. I can confirm that we're investigating this matter as potential acts of domestic terrorism, fueled both by anti-Semitism and anti-law enforcement beliefs.
Welcome to Full Circle. I'm Anderson Cooper. The Jersey City attack is now being investigated as an act, as you heard, of domestic terrorism with a, quote, hate crime bent, according to the Justice Department. Now, 3 civilians were killed inside a kosher market after a Jersey City police detective was fatally shot at a nearby cemetery. 2 shooters, a man and a woman, believed to be behind all 4 deaths. As the investigation continues, authorities are gathering more evidence about what could have possibly motivated the attacks. We are also learning about the attackers' backgrounds. As you just heard at the top of the program, they expressed an interest in this group, the Black Hebrew Israelite movement, something that many Americans likely have never heard of. The Southern Poverty Law Center reports that while the Black Hebrew Israelite movement as a whole is not by them considered a hate group, there are a number of factions within that movement they do consider hate groups because they hold anti-Semitic and extremist views. For more on all this, I want to bring in Brian Levin. He's the director of the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism. Brian, thanks so much for being with us. Talk to me a little bit about this group. I mean, I remember seeing members of this group in New York City going back from the time I was a kid growing up in the city, kind of haranguing people passing by on the street. What is the movement about?
Great question, and it's a broad movement that includes folks who believe that they're descendants of one of the 12 tribes of Israel, to others who say that Jews are actually phonies and the Black Hebrew Israelites are the real Jews. So there's a great diversity within the group. We haven't seen a lot of violence, although there was a stabbing a couple months ago in Florida, a double stabbing. But generally, it's as you said, most people's interactions with at least some of the splinters of this group, it's a diverse group, and they define themselves a bit differently. But the ones that most people are familiar with are the ones that kind of get involved in obnoxious street preaching.
And is there a central organization? I mean, is it kind of a top-down organization, or is it a bunch of just different disparate groups?
Yeah, there certainly was. It was started in the late 1800s, and there were different folks like a fellow named Frank Cherry and another fellow named William Saunders Crowdy. But today, I think what you'll see are for the ones that we're talking about, they're kind of splintered, and they generally work on their street preaching in the New York to D.C., where I'm at, Metroplex. But bottom line is, they're often, I would say, even cultish, but they're fragmentary and splintered. And there have been some who have been criminals, but for the most part, they've been peaceful. Some of the extreme fringes have indeed been anti-Semitic. But again, there's great variance, and it comes from the notion of African-American identity, and then it takes these tributaries, as you've described.
And the group believes they are true descendants of biblical Jews, and they perceive all others as essentially fake Jews. Is that right?
Not all of them. We have some folks who adhere to basically a Judaic perspective. Others who say they're Black Hebrew Israelites, but tend to look more like or try to promote kind of a perspective from early Christianity, and others that are really like African-American supremacists.
And according to investigators, one of the assailants had writings that showed what they said were, quote, favorable sentiment toward anti-Semitic groups online. In terms of numbers, would you say anti-Semitism as well as just hate crimes in general are on the rise?
What a great question. Hey, listen to this. 2018, we saw hate crimes flat, but violent hate crimes hit their highest level in 16 years. Listen to this as well. In the big cities, this is our center's research, we found last year the biggest percentage increases were against whites and Jews. This year in 2019, we are now seeing cities like New York City, Chicago, and possibly Los Angeles hitting decade highs. And now we're also seeing anti-Semitic incidents not only be #1 in New York, but also in Los Angeles. So what I think is important to recognize is any time that you have a movement, particularly one that's splintered, and there are those that are very much into in-group and promoting conspiracy theories or things like that, the toxic mold of anti-Semitism, whether it comes from one end of the spectrum or another, can reach into those areas. And again, remember, another thing that I think is important is, to the extent that we have seen demographic changes taking places in cities, I think that has affected targeting of different groups as well.
Do you have any sense of obviously this is a small group, and I've always thought it was just, a very small group. Do you have any idea of actual numbers of people who would claim to be members in some form of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement?
Oh, it's in the thousands. It's not a large movement, if you will. But I think this speaks of something, if in fact what's been reported is true, and that is we are living at a time now where we are seeing a broadening of extremism and a democratization of hate. So give you an example. African Americans were 42% of hate crime victims in '96. They hit a low of 27% last year. And what we're seeing are various types of prejudices, whether it's homophobia, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and anti-immigrant sentiment, go across different communities, including communities that have traditionally been victims of hate crimes.
That's what you mean by the democratization of hate.
Yes, but make no bones about it. Our center regards white supremacy as the most ascendant extremist threat. But we are living in an era now where even among extremists, they take prejudices as well as operational cues, not only from people within their orbit, but from successful extremists who they might even be antagonistic towards.
New York's Mayor Bill de Blasio said today about anti-Semitic hate, he said, if it happened in isolation, it would still be horrible. It is not, however, happening in isolation. Going forward, are there telltale signs law enforcement or people in communities should be on the watch for to confront or be aware of these types of acts?
Yes, and one of the things our center is doing with our friend James Nolan at West Virginia University is taking 30 years of FBI data and looking at the days, the dates, and the times when things occur. And what we found? Listen to this. The worst month of the decade for hate crime was November 2016. The second worst month was October 2018. Third, Charlottesville, August 2017. So what we're seeing now is a clustering of hate crimes and also extremist activities around elections, whether it's presidential elections here in the United States or Brexit in Britain, for instance. So unfortunately, I think the political atmospherics are playing into a tribalism that we're seeing in increased epithets online, as well as attacks on the street. One other quick thing. We are now seeing an increase in anti-Semitism around the world, and it's measurable. And we are now seeing mass attacks against Jews in a way that we haven't seen in the United States.
Brian Levin, I appreciate you being with us. Thank you so much. It's troubling.
Thank you.
Thanks.